Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we are bringing you straight from the cinema, moments after we've just left, or minutes after we've just left, we bring you Saw X, Roman numerals.
Yeah, Saw X. We're going to obviously, as we usually do with these films when we're straight from the cinema. I don't know why I fucked up, why I stumbled so badly. As always, we're going to talk a little bit about it spoiler free for the first 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to jump kind of straight into our initial thoughts and reactions to it. We've just also changed laptop to record onto. So we're not sure if this is going to be like regular audio volumes or if it's going to be really quiet as our second half of the Ringu episode was. So a little apologies in advance.
As we are trying to, as I said at the end of the last one, we are fixing our problems, and hopefully you will hear much improved sound this episode.
Maybe.
From now on. Or at least it won't keep cutting out on us, because that was the main problem. We had some editing issues. Every time we recorded, for some reason, it just decided it wanted to go, nah, I'm done.
I'm out.
I was like, just tell them to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, stop.
Stop doing this now, guys. No one wants to hear it.
No one wants to hear it. Yes. Not even the mic wants to hear
and
us.
Yet, weirdly enough, the Ringu episode, as probably terrible as it was, got us to number one in the charts.
One in Japan.
Japan. In the film history charts in Japan, we are number one, which we can reveal the background of that. It didn't do giant numbers for us or anything like that.
Big.
So I don't know if it's just people in Japan don't generally listen to podcasts of that kind of nature, because there are like some quite big podcasts with like celebrity names below us. So we're just like, I don't know if it's just a case of like, if two people listen to a podcast in Japan, it's like, number one. Like, they don't really care about it. I don't know if they really have a big podcast scene over there.
Either way, thank you to our new Japanese listeners for getting us in the charts, and our new Algerian listeners. I think like 4 weeks ago we were number one in Algeria as well. So thank you to our new listeners.
We are hitting all those markets.
Yeah,
we are hitting all those big markets. We're
markets.
Like David Hasselhoff in Germany.
Yeah,
not big in his own country that much for his music, but in Germany,
they fucking love
he's
him.
A fucking loved.
So as well, just before we get into it, as always, thank you for checking the show. Please hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. Next week we're going to be hitting The Exorcist Believer as well. But straight off the bat, Saw X, Saw 10, Saw Roman numerals. What's your initial reaction?
Well, this is interesting because I'm sure we've mentioned Saw in some way, but we have never done a Saw film before. We've never actually released one, oddly enough, thinking about how many are out there. We never did say Spiral or any of those, like that was the most recent one. So coming into this was very, very apprehensive about the idea. The second I heard about it, actually, I was apprehensive because I knew like who was behind it. I knew that I think it's Kevin Garant or something like that who was the director, but also part of the writing team. And he was part of the team that also made Saw: The Final Chapter, which I just think is a piece of shit film.
Yeah, it was
I think it both looks terrible and it just was awful. Like, it was just that final nail in the coffin at that point in time for people to finally go, yeah, we're ready to let this go now. So the idea of returning to Tobin Bell, but returning to it like this one does, which is set between 1 and 2.
Yes.
Was an interesting idea. I give him that.
I don't know if it's set between 1 and 2. I think it's set before 1, maybe.
No, it's definitely set. It's set after 1.
Okay.
Because I can't say because of spoilers.
Okay, maybe when we get to the spoilers,
there's a definite reason
we'll discuss.
It's set after 1, and obviously also, one thing you can say is if you've seen Saw, Jigsaw's in better health at the end of the first one from what you see of him than he definitely is here at the beginning of this one. But yeah, it definitely is meant to be set. I'm sure it's meant to be set between 1 and 2, is what they've said.
Maybe.
Between that, it takes place before. Obviously, it can't take place after 2. Otherwise, he would be in much different health.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he is definitely he's not in great health in this film.
No.
But in Saw 3, he's fucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, it's. I was apprehensive because I don't have the same affinity for the Saw franchise. I enjoy them. I like them. I wasn't the person who was going to see them every year in the cinema, though. I didn't see that many of the Saw films in the cinema, so I wasn't the person queuing up every year to see. Halloween was my Saw and Paranormal Activity time. No, that wasn't me. So I don't know how many I have actually seen in the cinema, to be honest. I think Jigsaw. I think I only saw Jigsaw in the cinema.
Maybe the same.
I think. So it wasn't the same for me. And obviously when the first one was released, we were still fairly younger. We were not old enough still to get into the first Saw film. And all I remember about that was just basically seeing like the foot on the DVD and my dad having like the DVD and me being like, I need to sneak a watch of that. How about you? How was your affinity to this franchise and this new Saw X?
I like Saw in general. I think it's, as it goes on, the storyline gets more convoluted and the films kind of look worse. But I think they're enjoyable and they're watchable. Like, none of them are particularly great, but they're at least fun. When I heard about this film, I wasn't sure how they were going to do it. Jigsaw was okay, Spiral was dog water. And I saw the trailer for this film and I remember messaging you like, it's great that they're going to start, they're going to bring the franchise back with the worst one yet. It's a very bold move of them. So I didn't go in with high expectations. But I'd say that whilst it's a very messy film in terms of like not just what you see on the screen, but in terms of storyline, in terms of pacing, and it's a very weird film. I don't think I'd put it as one of the worst Saws. I think it was kind of an alright film. It was a very weird film. It didn't really feel like a Saw film. This is the first one where I would say there is no kind of police procedural drama.
Yeah,
there's no police officers racing for them, anything like that.
Yeah, they're definitely approaching this one differently, which I think is an important thing to do because it had definitely run itself dry. And the police procedural side of it, with Spiral, for instance, they tried to go hard into it. They tried to go like, we're going back to... They acted as if they were going back to the first Saw film. They were going to do the cop side of it. They were going to do like Seven style. Yeah. And yet it came off with none of the skill of like Seven style. So yeah, Spiral was like dog shit in that way. So they needed to approach it from a whole new angle.
Yeah, and it's tricky because for me, a lot of what Saw is about is that police procedural kind of like... The one thing that I love throughout a lot of the Saw films is that there is a sense of urgency. There's a game being played, and people the police are having to race to not only figure out who Jigsaw is, but where this game's happening and how they can save the people. So one thing I felt throughout the whole film is that there was kind of just a lack of urgency. I was watching, and that's what made me think maybe this was pre-Saw, or not, especially not between Saw 1 and 2, because in Saw he is already established as having maybe 3 or 4 games. You've got the guy with walking on the glass who gets burnt alive. You've got the big lad who has to climb through the barbed wire. You've got Amanda, and I think there may be like one more before the main game. Yeah. So for me, there was no police involvement. There was no real urgency to the film. It just kind of like went along. I don't know whether I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. I feel like it kind of needs an element of urgency for a film like this. At least that's kind of my initial reaction. What did you think? Trying to herd the dog whilst we're doing a podcast.
I'm sneaking around, yeah. I'm sneaking around trying to do things at the same time because apparently everything decided to go off at the same time.
Oh yeah, of course. That's how it works, man.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I definitely get what you like. The Saw franchise to me, and I know that I have a very different opinion of the Saw franchise than you, because to me, I really loved the first one. I remember being completely like, oh damn, that original film, that original twist. You know, that whole, I think that ending, that, you know, that game over, closing the door,
iconic, man.
You know, that the screaming into the darkness kind of thing, is an iconic ending and possibly one of the best horror endings I think there is.
Yeah.
But as we said, like recently, and unnecessary sequels, part of me is kind of like, I really like that first one the same way, and I do kind of think in some ways that, you know, if it had just been left as that one, it would be seen as almost like a higher level of film than it is, whereas the films have degraded it down until it was just basically like it wore it down to a nub, you know what I mean? Like I like the second one, and the third one I thought had some interesting concepts, but for me, like, although I will watch them after that, I feel like both the quality, the story writing, and just the general continuity just started to just go so dire that I just don't see the rest of them really as good quality film. They're throwaway. They're, you know, I mean, they're just like, they are like, I guess it's like we could say with any like slasher film where it just starts going into weird supernatural mythical parts, like Curse of Michael Myers, stuff like that. It drove the idea into the ground. So there's still the fun of seeing the traps and stuff like that. So I'm not saying there's not still a fun to be had with many of the other sequels. But in terms of saying it's a good film, I think around about 3, I feel, is where they stopped making good films and just started making sequels, or it started to feel like, here's the next check. And it ran itself into the ground. I remember when we went, I think it was me and you went to Jigsaw together, and I remember thinking, oh, actually, I thought that one was better compared to, like, say, the final chapter and stuff like that. I think that was still like a big step up, at least in quality. At least it looked better, and at least it was trying to have some ideas, and it had some more interesting traps. Whereas the final couple of films, I thought the traps were getting very like, okay, you're just out of ideas with this, aren't you? Again, I'm not going to bother with Spiral because that was just terrible in all angles, traps included. That just wasn't fun. And this, so coming into this one, I mean, that's a major reason I was like, I'm not sure, because I wasn't sure if the world needed another Saw film. I wasn't I cared about the Saw films. And to be honest, the first, because Tobin Bell's Jigsaw, although he plays in, you know, throughout the films, and he has flashbacks and stuff like that, I can't ever say that I think Saw 2 probably was the one I had the most, maybe, that I felt the most like about him and things like that. You had more in Saw 3, but that was probably the one I liked the most. But I can't say he was ever, some people like Lord Jigsaw, like this big, and I can't say he's ever been one of my like horror icon or anything like that to me. The persona, the voice is more than the person to me. Like, it's like the voice, and people remember the puppet and stuff like that, and that was more iconic than Jigsaw himself or Tobin Bell being like that kind of guy. But this whole film is Tobin Bell's film. You know what I mean? He finally gets one where it's basically his film, and this is his film. And to be fair, like, he puts in a performance like he's performing in, you know, a higher level of acting than he has to put into a Saw film. You know what I mean?
You can tell he loves the character.
You can tell he's passionate about it, and that this is probably what he will be remembered for. So he's putting his all into it. He's not phoning it in. And I think one thing you can say throughout the franchise is, out of everyone else when they were giving shitty performances in the sequels, he always seemed like he was.
the podcast is over if you back to it off. You know, I love that man.
But he kind of he kind of goes through, and there is another character, but again, that's technically a twist, so some people may already know from.
We'll leave that
one for now. But Tobin Bell is kind of that strong part of this film, and I think he's a good reason to see it, and he's a good reason to make you care, I think, enough that some of the earlier stuff, if you're not into kind of that kind of more character driven kind of part, because you're used to a Saw film that's more like an hour and 20 minutes and is mainly just about traps. Because again, this one is an hour and 58 minutes, I think it is.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the sequels were literally like, I swear one of them was barely even hitting an hour and 20 or something like that. Like one of them got very really short. Yeah.
But it's interesting because you mentioned about not thinking of Jigsaw and Tobin Bell maybe as much of as big icon maybe, but to me, I was actually thinking this whilst we watched it. I think Jigsaw, Tobin Bell as an actor and as the character is probably the biggest horror icon, since the turn of the 2000s maybe. A lot, if you had to think of horror icons like Freddy and Jason, Leatherface, Michael Myers, all of those, he would probably be a big one, and he's probably, in terms of horror icons of the post 2000s, I would probably say that he is a bigger one, or the biggest. In terms of how they used Jigsaw, I felt that, like you said, the second one he was probably in the most, and the third one as well. He was a lot more of a background character than I think people will kind of want to admit. He dies in the third one, and then you basically hear of him from his apprentices, and you learn about him through characters and flashbacks. So it was very strange that we had a film, and it's the 10th film in the franchise, where he is actually the central character. It's not like in other films where we're following like Donnie Wahlberg and we see Jigsaw. It's now we're following him. And it kind of felt strange because it was like, well, now we're watching a film where like Freddy Krueger is now the focal point. He doesn't pop up every now and then. He's driving the action, and he's the main one that we're seeing the characters through. And it was, and I think that's where it got very strange, because shout out to the Cineworld worker who was having a little bit of a chinwag with us as we went to get our tickets, and he was saying like, this is nearly 2 hours, and I was thinking, fuck me, how are they going to do this? And maybe the first 40-50 minutes are a lot slower than you would imagine. It sets up, whereas usually if you're watching a Saw film, you have your opening trap, then you have people waking up in a trap, and then the rest of the story plays out from that point. But it was really kind of leaning into setting up the game that is going to be played, and witnessing John's journey. Like we know that he is Jigsaw at this point. Like I still think this is probably set maybe before the first one, just because there's a few points in it that made me think, okay, maybe it's before or maybe it's just after. But it was weird to see it from that. Should we do a last little bit about just general thoughts on the traps and the third act before we get into the spoilers? I realise we're nearly like 20 minutes in.
That's all right. Well, we're talking about it in that non-spoiler way. We'll tell you like when it moves, and we will soon move past that. But I do agree. I agree with what you said about him being this figure. It's not that I'm disputing that he's not a big figure in horror, and he probably, you're right, Jigsaw.
Yeah, I probably
even the
my brain doesn't
work.
What
is the Billy the puppet? That's the one. Those characters are probably the most iconic that we've had, like in this, like in this probably century kind of thing, away from those kind of ones. But also, I guess it works because Jigsaw is a man with a moral code more than any. You ain't gonna get that from Jason, and you ain't gonna get that from Michael. If you delved into his backstory, you might get that from Freddy when he was like a human kind of part of him. But
maybe
a lot of those characters are not
don't know
going
the moral code of fucking kids.
I don't know about the moral, but no, I mean there's like a prequel mystery that could be told there, kind of thing. So I mean, but I think he's the only one that can tell. That can have his kind of side of the story and could be able to tell the story. But yeah, I meant like for me personally, he just isn't the same level for me. Like I don't see him as I find his voice is almost more iconic than the character that he's playing, kind of thing.
What about spoiler free then? What do you think about the traps?
I was fairly impressed with quite a few of them. I think there is one you get early on, which is kind of a questionable of the reality of it. But the one that happens early on was like interesting, but felt very like fast kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I think that was just thrown in there so that it didn't feel like you were going so long without having a single one happen.
Think so.
But when we get into the main bulk of it, there were definitely some that had me kind of there like, oh shit, like I got that feeling that some of them gave me of that kind of, oh shit, okay, I'm tapping. Like I want you to kind of get through it. And some of them had that. Not all of them. Some of them felt a bit simple. Some of them had a nice little clever little twist. But yeah, I found them enjoyable, but not the most inventive of the series.
I think so. I agree on that. There was it was that kind of thing like you're at the 10th franchise. You're at the 10th installment. How are you trying to keep the traps fresh? And that's the real problem. Is like, how do you keep them fresh? And I agree. I think mostly they were interesting. One of the things that early Saw always had was like, it was very much about this is your problem, this is your sin, should I say? Yeah. And you're gonna have to like basically like sacrifice what it is that causes you to be a sinner or to live this shit life, and you'll be redeemed. And there was definitely some of that in the traps. I think they were, like you said, mostly
some of them were not as clear. That was one thing. The moral or the reason behind the trap didn't feel quite as well linked to why someone did it. Because basically they're all linked to the same kind of reason that he's doing this to them. So that does kind of bring it down a little bit when in the other ones part of the fun, I think, was finding out what did you do. Yeah. And this one, that's already taken away because you already know what they did. Yes. Whereas in a lot of the other ones, it's like waiting to find out, right, well, they seem like a nice person enough. What have they done that's so terrible? And that definitely, like, for instance, in like the first Saw, that definitely was a major part that helped with the mystery of it, the procedural kind of part of it, the police. Yeah. And that's kind of what made it feel more like a twisty-turny kind of film, whereas this one didn't feel like it had a couple of twists, but I can't say that they were like, oh my god, like, oh, that's a twist. Like I feel like, again, we've got a little bit of that classic Saw, especially with the sequels, where they think a twist was more clever than they actually are, or that people didn't see that coming like a mile away. I agree. And that includes with a returning character where I was like, I think they were advertised. They were quite rude. They were advertised. I don't want to say just part of the route. That's part of the route. And I do think it was advertised. But it's still in the film, though. The problem with that is that it plays it like this is like it's a twist. Like, oh my god, I never would have seen that coming in my life. One thing that did pop into my head as well was that classic, what is it, in the final chapter when they do a flashback, but obviously Tobin Bell had aged by about 15 years, so they put a cap on. Oh, that's in the sixth one. Is it the sixth one? No, it is in the final chapter, then the odd one with this one is that it doesn't feel like they actually tried to hide his age. So even though it's meant to be set between, it's wherever it's meant to be set, he definitely looks young. He definitely looks way older than he does almost 20 years ago. Well, I guess they could say but I'd rather they go with that and say that he's ill and looks old. I'd rather they go with that than try to put a baseball cap on. No, I don't know if he had a baseball cap. That backwards cut the whole film. I mean, that would have been quite funny, but and really dress him like a big hoodie. The only sad thing is they don't do it to him, and yet again, other character, they do that, and I found it very noticeable. Yeah, it was. I was wondering whether that was. There was one trap that I really did like, and it was the after shot, and that was like, it was like a mask trap. I quite like mask traps in Saw. And linked with Mexico and something. They teased it earlier. They teased it earlier, and it was good. It was fun. My main problem was I got into the gears of like, okay, we're going for a slower paced one. Like I said, one of the problems is I think that the lack of urgency kind of killed it a little bit for me. But when we got into the third act, I was laughing at points because it was just, I felt like the third act was just laughably bad. And then when the big plot twist at the end happens, the iconic music kicks in as the main twist happens,
and you're supposed to be like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I was just there like laughing, like this is so ridiculous.
Definitely. Without talking about what happens at that final end, that classic. Every Saw has it. That classic bit when you're hitting and the music is building. But when you get to that point, I didn't know exactly how it was going to play out, but I knew exactly.
Yeah.
I knew exactly where the twist was coming in that part of the film, and then not only that though, sadly, then the ending itself is super anticlimactic.
Yeah.
For one character especially, where you've basically now been rooting for that character to get their
to get their comeuppance.
And that's a disappointing part that you might find with that character of how they go or don't go, to keep it within the spoiler. But yeah, and then and then also you've got a little mid-credit tease. That's not a spoiler. That'll help you if you're sat in the cinema and you're listening to this before you're going in. There's a mid-credit scene that will give you a little, not saying a tease for the future, but it's there. So stick around for a little bit.
But it's a very weird one. Don't actually think about it, because I was watching it and I thought about it and thought, okay, whatever. But it was a cool one.
Yeah.
Should we do countdown for the spoilers?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, 5, 4, 3. Last time to stop listening. Remember to subscribe. 2, 1. Jigsaw hangs dong. And it's old and it's all wrinkly. It's real weird.
As we just on the spoiler-free section talked about that mid-credit scene, that's also how I know that it's set after the first one, because you can see the dead body of the character from the original film decomposed in the background.
I can see that.
He's in the background, so he's in the background in the floor, and you can see the bit that they're in the same room as the end of the first one. So that's how I know it is, but I also know because I've heard it in interviews.
No, I wasn't sure because I couldn't see the body. I knew it was the room, and I was like, is this just a room they're doing? And that made no sense because they were like, they didn't tell him the rules of the game. They just killed him.
No, they just started it.
They just started and watched him.
To be fair, we didn't see it actually go into him, so it could be like, we've started it, but now we're going to tell you the rules, which seems unfair, but yeah.
Very unfair.
That seemed to go against his moral code there.
Yeah, and that's one fucking thing that
with your Hoffman.
I love Hoffman, but I'm so annoyed. Like, really, the writing of this film had some dog shit moments. Like, they kept going throughout the film, like, look at you, like that main kind of woman who was supposed to be maybe like Swedish or something. I don't want to insult the few Swedish listeners we do have, but she was like, look at you, a man with a moral code. Yeah. And it was a bit more Arnie than Switzerland. Yeah. It's like Arnold in a wig now. But it was like, they kept being like, you look at you, a killer with a moral code. We don't kill people. We let them make the choice. And it's like, you kill people, man. The one thing that struck, sorry to butt in, but the one thing that really struck me out throughout the main things is like, a lot of the times in the films, they're like, okay, you've got poison in your system, and if you don't complete the game, you're gonna die. The second film in particular, they've all got poison in them. So if they don't play the game and they die, you poisoned them, Jigsaw. You poisoned them. Yeah. It just really annoys me when they're like, we don't kill people, and you're like, you do.
You
put them in a
literally
situation
just killed someone.
you kill them. But,
Literally just done that. Especially like in the, because isn't it in the first one when there's the shotgun trap left in the thing, and it doesn't. It's not even like a clever.
You killed Detective Singh,
it's
my
like,
boy.
Like, that's not like they have to survive. That's you walk in and there's a shotgun. Someone's gonna die at some point. You set up that trap. It's not like that wasn't even a clever one. So even from the first one, that's not that. And that's something that was, I feel like, was way more played up in the sequels. This idea that he definitely, I don't kill. I don't kill. Yeah. I feel like that was played up more in the sequels than it actually was in the original one, where it was a bit more just of a madman setting traps.
Yeah, basically.
This is part of the problem though, and this is part of the problem with the sequels and why they got rushed to get done for like a year. Everyone new year, it's like if you play like
like
you
COD.
Play COD, and it's like it's basically the same net of people that play FIFA every year and buy the game, and it's like because they spent there's a year between them. Studios have been like crossing over for the last couple of years to play, but don't expect there to be an amazing new thing added. They literally, if you want another one, if you keep asking for a new one every year, then the quality ain't going to improve that much.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, they've only had like a certain amount of time. Not that they do it in a year. They're way in advance to that. But still, it's still ridiculous. And that's what happened. They had like people who were just like, well, this is just stuff to just be pushed out. We just push it out, push it out, push it out. It doesn't matter. Oh, wait, have you actually reread the script? No. Did you even read it while you were writing it? No. Like in this one though, they've said they've had more time and they've taken the time away. But here's the problem: the original one was directed by James Wan and it was written by Lee Wano, who we both know are far superior than the people who made this one. So it's trying very hard to replicate somewhat. The first Saw is slower than the sequels.
But it's very procedural.
It is, so it adds a little bit more like mystery, so you feel a little bit more of that Seven thriller kind of vibe to it. So this one tries to take a little bit of that tone, but they haven't got someone who's nearly as well a good writer or a director behind the camera to go like, that sounds kind of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They've got the guy who made the final chapter and was like, yeah, it's good to go. You know what I mean? It's so... for me personally, like, this was far better than what I ever expected to get out of those guys. They've tried something which, to be honest, if they had managed somehow to get someone like Leo or James Wan to come back and do it, just to do this one thing, then I feel like there would have been a much nicer sleight of hand, and
maybe
his kind of cancer journey would feel a lot less than kind of just here we go. But Tobin Bell does the best he can with what he's got.
Yeah, and to be
raises the material, I think, than what was probably on the page, which was like, "Oh, you're dying, mate.
You're dying." And to be fair, I think like the actual build of the story, the people who have got to be in the traps, I thought that was quite cool. You know, so we find out that like Jigsaw's, he's already got cancer at this point. He's been told it's terminal. He has months left, and then he goes to that survivors group. He sees the dude, meets the dude again, and he's like, "Yeah, I went to this unit. I got it." At the time, I was thinking like, is he maybe in on it? Like, I don't know. I remember seeing the trailer, and it was very clear. Like, you conned me, telling me you treat me, so I knew that they were swindling him. And then I thought that was kind of done quite well. It was very weird how they tried to not like I saw a lot of people say that they were trying to make Jigsaw an anti-hero, and I wouldn't say that they specifically went that route until the very end where the wheels fell off. But it did. They played it a different angle. They definitely leaned into him a lot more. Yeah, you still felt like, okay, this guy has a twisted view of the world completely. Yeah, so that was one positive, that they didn't completely skew. I haven't seen, Don't Breathe 2 with Stephen. I haven't seen it either. Yeah, but I remembered some people going like, the first one worked so well because of this, and now you're trying to do this to him and make him this character, and it just doesn't work at all. No. I haven't seen it, but that's the kind of things I heard, and it's not it's become quite a common thing at the moment, where we've got properties and we're like, no, we're going to make them into an anti-hero like Venom, for instance, like that kind of thing. Like, why? Yes, in the comics maybe, but why? So with his character here, that was a plus, and I actually quite enjoyed the build up to it. I like it when they build a little bit more into the characters, and it felt like we had a nice setup for why these people were. But sadly, the only thing I would say about it is, you have a nice build-up with him, and he meets the man Henry Kessel, who's the guy who was at the group and was obviously, as we find out later, was putting on an act kind of thing. He's in the mid-credit scenes. But he meets him, and I liked these kind of moments, and the whole like travelling to Mexico and starting to see the unit. The sad part of it is that then these characters, though, that we then know are going to be the victims, some of them still feel very like, we didn't really get any chance to know you, because as soon as we got to that operation, that was it. It was like, you're out, you're here. Yeah, and you're conners. And that's part of the con. They're trying to get out of there. There's definitely questionable about like why he wouldn't feel that the back of his head is not got some kind of giant like. Well, to be honest, why Jigsaw wouldn't know that he, if you're having that kind of surgery,
at some point they would have shaved your head.
Well, and this is the one thing I got. I actually thought that bit was quite well done because they're pretty clear. Like they're like, okay, like keep your bandages on, don't get them wet.
Yeah.
And keep taking this, this painkiller stuff. So if they'd have just doped him up for a week, you could buy like actually he's probably not feeling much, And then when he finds out that it has been a con, I was like, it's a pretty fucking heartless con.
There is one thing that goes through my head this whole time because of the levels that they're willing to go to, and because of what they're doing, and because they've already been paid. I feel like this place would have just killed all these people.
Yeah,
they would have just gone and stab him in the neck. Right, surgery's over. Get rid of the body. Let's move on. Because no one knew where they were or what they were.
Yeah, but then I guess there would be like paper trails, Whereas if you but
there's still like loads of people to say like they conned me.
But then they would have gone back. They would have had the paper to say like,
yeah,
I'm cured. I don't need to have any more treatment. And then they die like 2 months later. And then they're like, where are these people? You can't find them anymore.
Yeah, I still think there'd be more like you'd go back and be to your actual doctor.
I think,
like,
of course you would.
And then you'd realise you're con. But then there's the paper trail of like there'd be people onto them because now, what I mean? They're already people that are obviously probably on some kind of list for the police or something because someone must have reported this several. They said there's been 34 of them, I think.
People, yeah.
So like someone must be on a list of like the police to do this. And then on top of that, so it's kind of on the point of like, I mean, I guess it's getting done for a even worse crime, but they feel on the verge of just like, they could have just like, they might as well just off these people. There's less of a trail there than sending people back out and being like, right, they've seen all these people, all these names.
Yeah.
They know some of our locations. They know some of the people involved. I feel like the humans are their major paper trail.
Yeah.
They might have
just fucking off him.
And in this case, they should have offed him because... But no, he meets these characters: Matteo, Gabriella,
Celia. She's the main woman, and Valentina.
Yeah. So those are the main people we meet within the area,
and Diego.
And Diego, who's the first one he meets when he kind of gets dropped off there by him in his first bit. We don't actually get to. I think we get to meet the other characters who stop him in that scene when they're in the taxi.
Yeah,
and they stop and get out of the guns and they drag her into the van and then.
I don't think that was fucking weird.
That I mean, I got it because you were like, oh, they're trying to go to a secure location, so there's no trail. But then Diego, that's why I thought that Diego character, like, that's it. They do this to like tourist things because then they just think they've been taken or something like that. But then it turns out he was actually on it, so I was like, "Oh, then I don't really, why did you need to?" I didn't really know why they needed to do that. Well, I think it was to make it. I think it was for part of the con, isn't it? It's to make it look.
But it's
like
not
this
only
is very secretive.
It's not only that though. It's about. It's so that if anybody realizes, they can't get them.
Yeah.
Because you see, John is like mapping out where he thinks they are. Based on what he saw, which is how he finds them. But other people would be like, okay, I realise I've been conned. I went to this field and they fucking abducted me. I wouldn't know where it is.
And I've that scene though, to be fair with him, you're just literally there, like, fair play to the performance because he legitimately looked like he was just about to have a heart attack. Saw X. He
just dies.
Like several times in this film, he looks like he's literally about to, oh shit, kill him. Like you feel like anyone else who's basically got like less than 2 months to live in that situation probably would have a heart attack and just die. Their body's already weak, their immune systems are fucked, so it's literally like he's dead.
He's dead. He's fucked. So now spoilers about the traps.
Yeah,
we won't talk about the whole film.
No.
What did you think about the main kind of traps that we get?
Well, let's go with the first one. So, and this one I believe is an imaginary one because it's what Jigsaw imagines he would do if he hadn't put the watch back. Which is the one that's all over the posters, which is the one that I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can't wait to see what that was. Whereas it's a sticky-fingered lad who is trying to still watches the custodian, and he, in Jigsaw's head, he thinks, right, he would put him up to a thing with his fingers in a trap.
Yeah, like a vice.
In a vice. This is one of the few ones where I know it'd be fucking horrible and painful.
Horrid.
Like, to have your fingers broken like in that way. And any of them would be horrid. But compared to some of the other ones that we've seen in the franchise, this was one where I was like, I feel like I could just about, if my eyes are about to be sucked out of their sockets, because he has the tubes going to his eyes with a pressure fit, I was like, yeah, I feel like I could do this one. I feel like I could just about...
all five
because he gets to 3. Yeah, I was going to say, but that's it. He was going like 1 turn. I'd be like, fucking do it. Break it all done. But it also seemed a bit low stakes.
Well,
for him.
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
Especially in his this is his imagination. He could go bigger.
Yeah. Well, I guess like the punishment is supposed to be like appropriate to the crime.
Yeah.
So, but Jigsaw is very inconsistent with the punishments,
well, all of it.
and proportions. Yeah, so he is, I mean, I say just, but he's just stealing from people who are in hospital. I know it's not great, but I don't think he needs to be horrendously maimed to learn a lesson, as opposed to the main victims who are conning people and the dying.
It's just interesting the way it's like, because obviously as he turns the dials, each of his fingers get pulled up, and basically to the point of snapping fingers. It's just interesting that they didn't go a little bit harder. I was expecting it more to be like pulling the fingers from which I think has already been done actually.
Yeah.
On the vice, like the old Chinese finger trap, like pulling the fingers out or things like that. Just to be a little extra more gory, I was expecting.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I was just like in his head that would be, but it does match the crime of trying to rob a watch.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. But I thought it was quite a cool trap.
Sucking the eyeballs out. It was fairly cool, and I think it helps that it was then revealed that it was in his imagination, because it felt like that's why I feel like that kind of balances out the reason why you feel like. I feel like you would actually go harder than that if you actually did it properly. If you really did it, Jigsaw, I feel like at the last minute you'd be like, yeah, break his fingers, suck out his eye, that's what's will happen.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute he's just like, maybe I'll find a way for it to pull each of his sockets out of place instead
or let's just explode his ball bag.
Or let's just split his head in half at the end. Just that.
Like, of course. He stole an old man's watch. Blow him up.
Exactly. Tick of a clock slices into him.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. But it was a fun one.
Yeah. It just felt a bit like sudden, that one, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the idea.
And then I do like it when, and that's part of why I do like, in these ones, the better of the sequels were definitely the ones when they had like them having to work as like a bigger team. So like Saw 2 I think is really good because it's like they're all together kind of thing, and then you've got the same thing in Saw 3 a little bit. And that all works quite like nicely in that way.
But it's all very much about human nature, and like in Saw 2. They can work together to make some traps easier, but everybody's got to be playing their own trap, and everybody's also kind of out for themselves. You know, because like if you're in like a Saw trap with a bunch of random people you don't know, and it's like there's a vaccine, I can I might not do my trap right, so I've seen somebody just do theirs. If I try fucking snatch it, give myself the vaccine and just wait it out, it's kind of that thing. But Valentina's trap was really rough.
Valentina's, I think, actually for me was probably the worst of the ones that they had here. I think I had the biggest reaction to her trap than the others. I liked the style of of Mateo's one, but Valentina's I think just felt a bit more like raw for how much she had to do to herself, because hers had like several layers of pain, and that's kind of what it is like. For her not feeling as much like she was as maybe deserving as certain ones as well, you know what I mean? But then I felt like, so she's set up in one where she's got a like kind of like a razor wire or wire that's around her neck, which will then move forward towards her neck, and it once she fails the trap, so it will kill her in very quickly. So that part's very vain, but the rest of it is her getting what is it?
Like a cheese wire.
Cheese wire, razor wire kind of thing. And she has to slice up through her leg.
It's rough.
Which is rough. And then after that she has to get a basic suction and stick it inside the bone to get the marrow out of the bone, to get enough marrow to fill it up. She sliced her leg, and then she has to do that as well. And it's such a like that one felt like piling on. 3 minutes felt like it was an unfair amount of time.
Definitely, I was like, 3 minutes, man. Come on, you need at least like 10 for that.
And this one, I think the good thing about this one is like, and that you sometimes get, and maybe that I didn't feel maybe as much with one or two of the other ones, was there was urgency with this one.
Yeah,
because she hesitated for about the first minute. She only had about 2 minutes. Once she started cutting into her leg, she only had like less than a minute left to suck the marrow out of her leg. So that you really kind of felt for her, and I think I could feel myself like tapping my leg, like, come on, like. And it's the fact that they play the classic. She gets literally within seconds of like getting it. It's like the dial is almost there when it starts moving.
That happens with a lot of. I mean, it happens with a lot of them in this film, but I'm trying to think if that happens in the other ones quite as much. You do often get people who
I feel like there's
stall and
I
then
feel like it was a fairly common like thing that they get this close and then they're done kind of thing. They've done all of the pain they can do to themselves, and now you're dead anyway.
It's the hesitation that always fucks them up, isn't that?
And it's that horrible part of it. And I think with her death, and also to be honest, she's also like literally when she gets caught by them. I think you went to the toilet just as the bit when she was getting caught, but she was literally like moments from being raped. By like this big guy in the back of a car. And luckily, she's saved. I'm not sure that's so true.
Well, that's when
she's just gone. That's like the last moment, the last day of her life was what happened today. I went to a club. I got manhandled. I almost got raped in a car. Now I'm slicing my leg off, and I have to suck the marrow out of my leg. Lovely. Like then my head gets lopped off.
Yeah, it was really funny because when I went to the loo, I was like, now's the time to do it. I'm gonna before it kicks off. I came back, and as I was coming back, there was a dad and his two toddlers that must have been about 4 years old, 4 or 5 each with popcorn, and he opened the door to Saw, and they were walking in just through. And I went to him, "Oh no, that's Saw, that's Saw 10," and he was like, "Oh, we don't want to watch that." And one of the kids was like, "Is this our film?" Or sort of like,
Paw Patrol?
It was Paw Patrol. They were watching. They were like, "Is this
Paw
it, Daddy?" And I was like, "Saying it."
And they would have been terrible because the bit that walked in was pretty. The first time I think when you walk back in was when you see the pig mask.
That was the first pig mask, and the dad. To be fair, the dad had a real good sense of humour about it. He was like laughing. He was like, "We don't want that one," and they were like,
In reality, that dad's pissed off at you for like pointing out because he's like, "Now I've actually got to go watch Paw Patrol." Like he's like, "I was going to sneak my kids into Saw X."
No, I did. When we went to the cinema, the Paw Patrol. It has like a neon like style poster. It looks quite similar to the Five Nights at Freddy's one. And I walked past it and I said to Anna, I said, "Oh, we're going to try and cover that for the podcast." And then I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, Paw Patrol." Like Paw Patrol. First 15 minutes spoiler free, then we get into it.
I mean, people were trying to push the they had the Barbieheimer. People were trying to push the Saw Paw Patrol because it was going at the same weekend. They were trying to make their own little like crossover event, like everyone goes to see Paw Patrol followed by Saw X.
Yeah, protect your kids.
Poor X. But no,
Valentina's was rough. Mateo's was good.
What I also like about Valentina's was actually just the effect of when she falls apart. You've already got the leg on the floor, you've got the head that rolls across, the body falls, and you've got all of those bits there, and then they try to survive. And a good point to throw in the showing how ruthless. What is it? Sienna or Selena? Celia, completely one of them. The ruthless of that when she also then gets her guts used for they can get the freaking table to get the phone to try and ring. That's left there, which you're there like, well, this is obviously it is put into question because you do wonder whether Amanda, who we haven't mentioned yet, whether Amanda is trying to help them because she's unsure about helping Jigsaw yet.
Well, she's trying to help Gabriella because Gabriella's a drug addict. She was a drug addict. She has this whole kind of sympathy. And what I did like is maybe this was like the point where Jigsaw was like, "All right, Amanda, you need to be tested again," Because the second one, she's going through a test.
Yeah, it's unclear that whether Amanda, it doesn't make it that clear whether Amanda knew that, so it was a set trap, the phone, because it is part of the final little twist, I guess, or whether that was testing. But there is a constant kind of testing throughout. But then that's the thing. It kind of makes you question all that, because quite often when she was talking about these things, quite often she was with them in the room when she was questioning him about them, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's like, is it part of the long con, or was it part of the? But there definitely is some on her face. So yeah, I guess we should talk about that in the room of Sawney Smith returning as Amanda, which is part of that scene we talked about before with the when we see the pig mask, gets Matteo, gets Gabriella in the toilets,
and gets Valentina.
So in the film, it is definitely played like a twist that she's back.
It is, isn't it?
It is like a big sudden reveal. Like, it flashes back to all three of them. Like, oh my god, look, it was actually Amanda the whole time. Yeah. But I got to be honest, the second I saw someone moving around who was able to move quite freely. I knew it wasn't Jigsaw, Kramer underneath that, because when they smashed the guy who was trying to rape Valentina in the car. It's obvious that that's not him, so I was like, it has to be someone else anyway. But I was like, it has been shown in promotional stuff anyway. But I was like, it was very obvious. You could see from the body type it was a woman. You could see from the hair, and quite often she was the one that tended to wear the pig with the hair anyway. So if you knew the franchise, you knew it was her. Who it was her underneath. So if you'd known that, but it's just a bit weird in the film, because I know for anyone who hasn't seen these films before is coming in at new isn't going to have a freaking clue.
No, they'd be like, oh, who's this?
And anyone who knows the franchise, I feel like pretty much would have gone, yeah. I knew that was. I knew that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not against it. What I did like about her returning is that we got to see more of the relationship between Jigsaw and Amanda. I quite liked it as well when he rang Hoffman and he was like, detective, I need help locating this person.
Which again, you know, if you've known, it's nice that that wasn't a twist. That was just
it wasn't a twist.
It's a nice little call for
nice
the
little wink,
Easter eggs and stuff.
And I liked seeing him turn up at the end. But I don't know. It was just I liked seeing that relationship between them played out, and that kind of like. It made me think at the end, is he then going to knock her out, and we see him put her in the house for Saw 2, because Saw 2 is very much Amanda's going back in there again. She does reveal herself.
That was the bit I couldn't remember, because it's Saw 2. She's not in Saw 1. Is she?
She's in Saw 1.
She's in Saw 1.
That's when you see the.
That's when she gets. That's why she's part of the thing, and that's why it's set up for 2. So this is why this is us revealing basically how she became part of his program properly. From what happened to her in the first Saw film. I was sure she was in Saw 1, but I haven't rewatched Saw 1, whereas you've rewatched Saw recently, because we were originally recording it before this one. We may still do it after this one. But yeah, so it was good seeing that relationship, and she gets some really kind of fun, also kind of some lines that actually made me kind of laugh, to be honest. The little quirky, like the one she says to Valentina, does it, don't lose your head or something like that, which is probably the most obvious joke in the world. But she delivered it in that kind of, the way that Amanda had that kind of crazy...
Well, she is a bit of a nut,
that's what I mean, spirit. The way she delivered some of them was really good, and it was nice to actually get a film where you kind of got to flesh that out, because before it was just little flashbacks. It was little flashbacks, so you didn't really get to see them. You didn't get enough of them properly interacting. Like in Saw 3, he's fucked out. You know what I mean?
He's high as fuck in a bed, just beating off. That's all he can do.
But the only thing that did get taken away from it is her makeup for the film is not good.
No, and
the wig is
the wig was awful, man.
Like really badly noticeable. I know they're not going to ask her to cut her hair or whatever, for that role, for like that part of a role, but I mean, you can do better.
You see that part of a role, but she's in a good chunk
of this film, But I still,
the wig was awful.
There's still much things they could have done much better. Or I would have said it's worth just letting her have whatever hair she has. Like, it's worth that continuity issue for not letting her look like that the whole freaking film.
Yeah.
It just looked awful, and then the way that they tried to de-age her with makeup.
She had a really shiny face, didn't she?
But the problem was you could see the makeup. So there's like a scene when she was crying about John, like dying, and it's like literally you could see the trail, like the thickness of the foundation level that they put through. You could see the tear like slightly move and then be like, I ain't getting through that. I'm not getting through that hole. And you could see like a dip in her face where it's like, this is how much all of those tears have only broken through this tiny beginning of this barrier. Like they're like, push lads, push, we've got to make a teardrop. So it's one thing that sadly takes away from it. I know you couldn't have the character. I know Tobin Bell's is more explainable why he may suddenly look ill because he's been through chemo and all those kind of things, whereas she hasn't been for anything, so she can't suddenly go from like a young woman in Saw 2 to like a 40-year-old or 50. I don't actually know how old Sawney Smith is, but you couldn't have that happen. But at the same time, I feel like there were better ways around it than that. Ways they could have dealt with it, not even needing CGI. It just wasn't the best makeup cosmetic work I've ever seen. No,
and I think at least with Hoffman, when you saw him at the end, like because he was in it so short, and he was like in his 40s when you saw him anyway. Yeah. I don't think they did really any de-aging on him because he just looked
they
like
didn't.
He does.
They just kind of angled it, so you didn't see his face.
You
like
saw it
straight
side
on.
Yeah.
You saw the side, so they could have maybe done a little bit to the side, or kind of added a little sheen, so it does that. But
I
works
love
okay with that.
Man.
I know it was harder to do that with someone who plays a more major role in the film. But the mainly I'm sad because I actually think Sawney Smith, I actually used to find her quite annoying in character quite often. So I wasn't the biggest fan of the Amanda character anyway, whereas I actually quite liked her in this one. So I was just a bit sad that I think possibly one of her best performances within the franchise. Yeah. And it's a little bit ruined by the way that she looks,
because it's very
not
it's
the way that Sawney
distracting,
Smith's look. Like to be honest, I feel like most people would have gone with it if you just went, "Oh, she looks older. Oh well."
She cut her hair. And
yeah, who cares? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter that much.
I quite liked the Amanda character. I thought that it was good to see her as a bit of like an unhinged. Hoffman was my favourite apprentice on God. I thought the Lawrence Gordon, twist was dog shit.
Oh yeah,
it was the most obvious thing.
I think in general, I just didn't really. I think even the guy who's made this one, the guys who've done the thing, they said the biggest thing that they did wrong was killing Tobin Bell. Yeah, they fucked themselves when they did that, having to make up all the extra apprentices and stuff. Well,
I like the idea.
I don't think I ever really liked. That's my. I didn't really. I liked his character for what it was used for, and he was the mastermind. And I know there was only so long you could go on with that anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I said to you before, and I'm gonna go for it. That, he did it like. As a character, I just felt like basically, and this is the same for when we're watching like Hellraiser, I feel like it basically went from one sleazeball character, but then they always go to the sleazeball cop character who we've got here, which then went to another kind of sleazeball cop character in the franchise. And you know what I mean? And then, I don't know, to me, they always feel like the exact same character in several different franchises, but it's just like, so you're the sleazy cop. You're grimy, you're a bit of a slime ball. You're a bit of you talk disgustingly about people. Yeah, you just seem like a straight up serial killer. But he was closer probably to a straight up like serial killer. Yeah. He didn't really have the moral code. That's kind of what was about his character.
But here's the thing that I liked about those apprentices. Like Amanda felt okay as maybe like a first one, like a first protege, but then fails because she's just a nutter. I like Hoffman because he's an inside man, so he would know people's records and creepy stuff about people. And I like Gordon because it does make sense to have a doctor, because if you see all of these things and you're like, how is a key behind somebody's eye? Like, you're a civil engineer, but you're not a doctor. That stuff made sense. It's just that they introduced him in the opening of the last one and make him so obvious that he's it. Yeah. Whereas if he was in it a bit more, it would be better. But
it was horribly shoehorned.
It was horribly
shoehorned.
Again,
it was just it felt cheap because it was literally like, we just need something.
We need someone.
We need something to link it back to the original. And it seemed like Carl Hughes, I think his name is, who played that character. It felt like he only agreed to be in it. Like, I'll film like a day.
Yeah, I'll do a
so
day.
You could do like that much of me, but that's it. I'm not doing any more.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the traps. We didn't finish the traps.
How many more traps are there? Mateo's trap is good.
We only did one. We've done two.
We did two.
5-ish.
Yeah. Mateo's trap was good. I'm just thinking
that was cutting off the scalp.
That was cutting off the scalp, but that was where the heat mask.
I kept thinking with his one though, because of how he was able to drop it in. I did kept thinking whether in my head I would have been thinking, well, all it needed something to dissolve in order to cause the patterns. I kept thinking I would have just lopped something else off and tried.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like, put my fingers in it and just be like, it's doing it. You know, fucking horrible, but you know what I mean? Try to put something or one of those products on the table. Just go.
Yeah, and then they just watch.
It's dissolving.
And they're watching you, and I'd just be like, no, my brain.
I know, it wouldn't work like that because I'm cheating the rules of the game. But still, I was just like that. I'd be like, well, I've got a second. But yeah, although I was partially expecting it to come back open just to see the after effect. Yeah. So again, but they don't go quite. I'd say that apart from Valentina's, it's not quite as gore porny as it was in previous ones.
No.
Which I'm alright with because it can push it too much sometimes. And sometimes, like his... is one of those that I think the imagination in your head works better. The burning, the screaming,
and the hearing it, and then the cool mask. I didn't like Gabriella's.
No, I feel like it was quite poorly put down in that way. And I kept thinking that I don't know why, but I did keep thinking that because she had one leg that was bringing her down from the ground, one arm up there. So I was very when she told her to do the leg first, I was like. Nah, do the hand because it will drop you down. Whereas it was the most obvious thing that's going to swing you across, and then it's going to move over. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It just didn't work. The whole radio beam coming at you and the heat of the radioactive, and there was just something that just felt a bit anticlimactic about that bit. Definitely. Yeah. It felt like she was going to get something really interesting because the whole film was going on mainly about Gabriella List. Yeah. He really liked her. It felt like he would have the scorn that he felt towards Gabriella, which is why you get that nice with Amanda because she's a drug addict. They have that kind of back and forth. It felt like there was going to be something bigger than just the burning. I don't know if that's because maybe actually that's him going easier on her actually.
I don't know. But it felt a bit like...
Yeah, it just felt, we're heating you up, you're slowly getting burned. But really all I'm seeing here is most of the time it's just you whacking off screen. Yeah. That was Rob in the cinema.
I was just whacking it all.
But whacking her hands and whacking her leg and then, it just... There was none of that brutality that you felt, and it was underwhelming. And then obviously we get to kind of here's the weird one. So we get so we've got all of this build up, and we've had who was the other character that came back in? I can't.
Pearson something.
I don't know.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah. Oh, we forgot about Diego. He was the second one.
Diego's trap was.
He had the two. He
got pipe bombs on your hands.
Pipe bombs on his arms, and he had to slice it out, and he actually survives.
Yeah,
because he actually did it.
But it was I think that was a shit trap.
Yeah, I don't know what that one was the brute, and this was the thought going through my head. It was like when I saw the first one was fine, but I thought it was a bit quick, a bit sudden with the eyes.
But it's an imagination,
and then
isn't it?
And then the second one with Diego. And very quickly I started thinking, this was the problem with coming back to the Saw franchises. I just feel like everything's going to be underwhelming and every trap's going to be... And that's why it's kind of like, you've done it. You've already done this to death. And can you do any better? Valentina's brought it back up. Mateo's was okay. And
I think Mateo's kept it at a level.
Kept it, about there. And then we have it brought back down by Gabriella's. Then followed by this twist that they thought was clever.
I don't know how they thought this was clever. I think
they thought that this was clever. And it's very unclear really right in my head exactly what John Kramers' plan, whether he was actually meant to properly end on that. And he definitely never intended for the boy to be in that because he liked the boy. So that definitely I don't think was part of his plan, the boy.
No, I think the fucking random boy.
Whether he expected Amanda to be a bit on that as well with him.
Yes, that's what I think.
My guess. But then even then, that's why I guess you can explain why it's such a mediocre, as in it's a mediocre trap that didn't feel like it was properly going to ever do anyone really any damage. This trap doesn't really
well, it's not supposed to.
Well, no, that's what I mean.
I don't know if it's supposed to.
And that was the question, but he says quite early on, even with the book, that this already isn't quite go, that didn't go to like plan and things like that. And
Yeah.
you assume that's because he thought it would be them put in, and then they'd get themselves in the room. At the top.
Here's my kind
Summarise.
of my thoughts watching this is obviously Pierce Brosnan. I can't remember his name. I'm just calling him Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan turns up. They've lured him there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, they conned me. Look, I didn't have thyroid cancer,
whatever it was.
I didn't have that. They've conned me." And John's like, "Okay, like there's no guns. You got to sit and watch." So I think that his whole thing was you can basically watch your friends and the woman you love die horribly, and that's your game. And if you play by the rules of not trying to save anyone, not pulling the gun, just watching this horrendous stuff happen, I will let you go. However, if you try and betray me, then you and Celia will go on the blood thing, because he knows they're in a relationship, and one of you is going to have to drown the other one under the blood. You're going to have to fight. And then, obviously, Pierce Brosnan does betray them, puts them into it. And originally John's like, okay, they've got to put me and Amanda in it, because that's the natural thing to do. Instead, randomly, this Celia character, one is like,
shows herself to be a mega psychopath because she kills Gabriella by crushing her spine, basically, on her neck.
But then she's like, I knew you were John Kramer. I knew you were Jigsaw. And I was thinking, like, how? How did you know that John Kramer was Jigsaw? I mean, he gives some vague hints that he's a civil engineer and he helps people get through things.
This is the point, though, when they tried to make her
like a supervillain.
They tried to make her so much worse than Kramer, so that it suddenly feels like this is when, now you're really trying to push that he's an anti-hero. This is the one bit when they take it too far. I could see why it was working as his character without him having to be an anti-hero. Before this, it was working. The balance of like, we can follow this guy without him having to be the hero, without having to save anyone. And this is the point when she goes all mustache twirly, I am mega bitch, I'm mega killer, I'll kill these people.
I'm just going to kill. I'm
Which
just
again
going to kill
links
a
back to
random
my
boy.
thing I said earlier, which was, if she was like this the whole time, I feel like there would have just been a bunch of dead bodies in the desert, because she wouldn't have gone to this fucking level to like do it all. She would have just been like, get them in, off them, bury them in the Mexican desert, done. Because that's the character we get at the end here, but that's not the character she is for most of the film.
No, it's a very weird thing.
And it tries to play up that she was trying to help them, because the other guys, she was trying to push them to do it. And then suddenly at the end she's like, oh, I was very happy you helped them die. But it's just like, at the same time, you're like, but why? That makes no effect on the audience. That makes no difference to us whether she was helping them or not helping them. You know what I mean? Like, it would have been better if she was revealed earlier on to be a bitch, so she can be like trying to basically go against them. There's no dramatic effect to this, because we have no stakes in her, and we know John doesn't care. So the only stakes that can come up with is, we introduced a child 20 minutes ago, an hour ago.
You know that boy who helped
make
fix
a bike.
He's kicking a ball against.
And the only word we know how to say is pull.
Yeah.
Which, I was there when they were doing that scene with him and that. I was like, okay, I thought you were going to ask the boy to like pull something to help you do it, but you don't. You just tell him. So why are you trying to tell the boy to do pull? Because you pulled the wheel out of the thing a second later. Why?
I think
it was terrible. Just so later on he can be like, no pull.
Yeah, that's it. And it was fucking
out
awful.
Of context. John Kramer and a small boy, and he's telling him about pulling.
He's teaching a small boy to pull in a shed.
Because we know
7 a.m.
John Kramer is like a murderer. I'm so, like, there's hard not to you to feel the second he's like walking after this small boy that you see like broken with his bike, and then takes him off to a shed. Strong diddler vibes. You're thinking, we're going anti-hero with this, but you could have gone the opposite way and gone real dark with this.
It was fucking awful, man. I just thought like, so they've just turned her into a villain. We knew that there was this twist coming, and then the whole thing is, I knew as soon as they put John Kramer on the chain and were like, sit on this thing, I knew that the big twist was coming. And then they go into like the main office, Pierce Brosnan and Celia, and they're like, okay, we've got to get the money. They pull the bag where the money is, and then it's like do-no-no, do-no-no, and you're like, oh, this is the twist. This is the bit where like the penny drops and everything's gone bad, and it's just like you got 10 minutes in a room full of gas. There's only a breathing hole for one of you. You're gonna have to fight for it, and I'm now a hero. I've saved this random little boy, and I'm gonna give him $8 million in cash, because that's the perfectly financial responsibility to do, is to give a young Mexican boy $8 million. It's like
it just every twist at no point. It just doesn't make any with her. What was it again?
Celia.
I don't know why I keep like blanking that.
I
name
think that's her name. It might not be.
Well, yeah, maybe the wrong one the whole time. But Celia, even
yeah, it is Cecilia.
Like even the twist and stuff with her and Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan.
Like even that stuff, it just doesn't like. Not only was it obvious that with his character, that something else was going on here, and that the gun was never going to have any bullets. So you're there the whole time, like, well, that gun obviously doesn't have bullets. John Kramers not that stupid. So why are they letting you lead it down? So there's obviously a trap here going on, and just at no point does it just have any connectivity apart from just so that she can betray him in the last few minutes, which are again just the crappiest way. Okay, if you're going to make her like a super villain bitch, then we want a death that's going out on super villain level.
Yeah.
And we don't. In fact, she survives. Are we trying to set up a sequel for some reason that she's going to come back after him, and we're going to set again somehow, it's going to set again after before Saw 2, before any of this happens? Because I don't understand why else. Because I thought at least what she was going to get, because they're in a room and it starts doing like acid smoke, whatever. They're fighting. He says they're going to have to fight for it, and then there's only one place to put their head through. I thought at least she was going to get like burned to like 90% of her body, so you start seeing the rest of her body burn from the acid. So she's protected her head, so she might still survive, but her body's going to be like fucked. You know what I mean? Like, but instead, no, she gets a couple of burns to her face. She kills Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan.
And then that's it. And then she's left there, and then we just see them walk out with the small boy, and it's Saw X, and it's like, where was the comeuppance? I don't even see where she's learnt a lesson.
Yeah,
like literally the evilest person, the one person who should come out of this, and even if she was going to survive, should have been left with major injuries in which to see that she's up. And also because they built her character up as such a strong character, I really wanted to see her in a trap, because I felt like she was going to be a force to be reckoned with. She was going to literally like that character. One thing I will say is they had made her seem strong.
They did.
So one thing I was expecting to see was basically her be put in a trap where she has to hack something off herself, and she just fucking goes for it. Boom, like seconds, and she's like done. You know what I mean? Like it's brutal. Like that's what I was expecting to see, and I feel like that's what it was being built up to. So when it went to this, it was like, and then it was the fact that they had that, you know, the way he was covered in blood almost felt a little bit like the original, you know, picking up off the floor. But that ending there was nothing like on the original. They were trying to match, in some ways, I think, the tone of Saw. Yeah. The original Saw. And at the end, they spectacularly fail.
Yeah, they shit the bed. I thought...
And I'm very... just to like wrap up my thoughts there, I'm very surprised, to be honest. Like, I enjoyed this film, and it was better than I was expecting it to be, and I think my expectations were raised because I had such low, though, to be fair. But I am a little bit surprised that there's such a buzz that this is like the best reviewed Saw film.
It's very weird.
I feel like there's been a distance between the films, and people have come back to excited that there's a Saw film in the cinema, and I totally get that. But I do think that when that wears away, apart from Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith's performances,
which are good,
and trying to reinvent the idea, I do think that on repeated watch this, and I would still probably, because I don't like most of the sequels, I'd probably still place it around the 3, 4-ish kind of area. Okay. I'd still probably put it around there, but I do feel that when people get away from that first nostalgic kind of watch of seeing it, away from Halloween season maybe, and rewatch it and go, actually on rewatch this is not that great. Like, even as we said, there's only really one or two of the kills that we were really that impressed by anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so
it's a Saw film.
It's a Saw film, yeah. I was expecting the end. They're locked in that room. They've got this kind of like, hideous gas, corrosive gas coming in. I expected, it's fairly hinted at that they're going to have to fight. There's only a chance that one of them can be safe. I expected that the gas was going to leave. It wouldn't kill people, but it would leave them like horrendously scarred, horrendously burnt. Yeah. So she would kill Pierce Brosnan, and then when she put her head through into the the bit where she can breathe air, it would be like the trap in the second one where she puts her head through. There's blades there, and as she tries to pull back, it cuts into her. She's stuck and she's gonna bleed. And the whole thing was gonna be that like if they'd have both waited there and just sat in the gas, they'd be horrendously burnt, but they wouldn't be dead, and they would have had to fight.
It looked like there was a second one, didn't there? It looked like there was two.
I didn't get
there
like
was
that,
two,
yeah.
there was two gaps.
Two,
It looked like there was two
open.
gaps. That's what I mean. One was open, one wasn't. But again, I was expecting something with a head stuck as well. Yeah. So that expectation came in my head too. So what are your? I kind of wrapped up my thoughts. So what are your wrap up thoughts on this?
Okay, so to summarise, like I do like the Saw films. They're not a particularly good film, and I wouldn't say that this is a particularly great film either. It's quite flimsy. It's very messy. I think the lead up to maybe the first two acts are pretty solid and enjoyable. The third act just shits the bed so hard that it makes it laughable. It builds up to something much bigger in terms of trap wise, and it just kind of ends it with like a wet fart, basically. Like it's not that great. I don't think it's the worst offender. I still think it's better than the final chapter. I think it's better than maybe the fourth and maybe the fifth one. Much better. It's better than Spiral. I would probably say it's not quite as good as Jigsaw, not quite as good as the sixth one. Middle of the pack, it doesn't particularly stand out. I'd watch it, and if you're a big Saw fan, you might enjoy it. I don't think it's particularly horrendously bad. It's just let down by an absolutely horrendous third act and twists that don't really work. A lot of logic problems.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I do think. I think if you, I think though, to be honest, if you're looking for like a horror kind of date thing, and like I'm not saying it's fun, but if you're coming into this expecting kind of what you got used to with the previous ones, where to be fair, it was much more, gore porn, gore heavy, trap heavy, mainly about the traps, mainly about the kills. Then again, there might be a bit of disappointment with that as well, because it is much more, as we said, it is much more John Kramers' film. Yeah, and to be fair, when it focuses on him without trying to add in extra twists, I think it mainly works, and it could have been a much better film, I think, if it was handled better by maybe a better filmmaker. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's an interesting story that I think was there and could have been told. I just think they just mishandled it, and that's the problem. If you're going to build up to a third act that felt like there was lots of good things in place that could have made a really interesting third act here, and then they just kind of showed it in, and again they lent into that worry of that anti-hero kind of thing, and that kind of ballsed it up.
Villains and characters can be cunts. Let them be cunts.
Just let them be that.
Let them be horrid.
There was enough of a nice balance with Shawnee Smith's Amanda to have that kind of emotional edge. Yeah. But you didn't need him to then be that emotional. He was clearly being the one that was like, no, this has to be done. Yeah. She was that. There was a nice enough balance there where you could relate to that enough. You didn't need to then have him have the child and the boy, and it was all just a bit uncomfortable as well, to be honest. It just didn't work.
He's not a player. Explain the rules to him. He's not a player. This isn't his game.
To have that moment with, the boy's trying to save me, and he's pulling me off. No, I'm going to pull him off. Yeah,
everybody's pulling everybody off.
Everyone's pulling each other off.
And you're supposed to be like, the boy is helping John Kramer, and you're just thinking, fuck John Kramer. If John Kramer died, many people would be alive.
Exactly.
Many horrible people, but also many people would be alive, you know.
So very mixed bag.
Very mixed bag.
You wrap us up.
Yeah.
For
Well,
this week.
there we are. Very mixed bag. As always, we hope that you've enjoyed the show. Next week, we will be looking into Exorcist Believer, another potential mixed bag. You know, in terms of David Gordon Green, we've done good reviews on Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends with Josh. So go and check those out if you want to know kind of our thoughts a little bit on David Gordon Green.
Not good in quality.
Not good in quality.
No, I mean the film. Not necessarily.
The film. The podcast was incredible.
Yeah.
Award-winning, I would say. But we're going to be touching on that as well. Come and let us know your thoughts on Saw X, Saw Roman numerals 10. And remember to hit that subscribe button. And please leave us a lovely review. We will see you next time. The game is over. See you next week. Bye-bye.